All right, hey everyone. Today we're talking about David Hume. David Hume is one of the people who has influenced the way pretty much everyone sees the world, even if they don't realize it, because the whole lineage of modern thought in the Western world, the modern world in general, it kind of goes through Hume. He's responsible for a lot of the thoughts that philosophers had after him, and that's responsible for a lot of the way the world works right now. So I noticed it in debates and discussions like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, and a lot of other modern conversations. A lot of people take different things away from them because a lot of people don't have the appropriate prerequisites to actually understand what's going on, in addition to just having their own perspectives in general. And so I'm interested in kind of tracing the ideas back to where they came from and figuring out what people are missing so they can understand more in the modern world. And Nate here, he asked me about Karl Marx and to understand him better, what ideas to look into. And I thought that a good starting place would be briefly Descartes, just very briefly, but mostly Hume for to begin with, because he was really big, one of the major ones. And so yeah, so this is Nate. Nate, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I am Nathan. I'm just honestly just a normal guy. I studied music production in college, but have just kind of been interested in philosophy and just different ways of thinking about the world. And this all just came about because, yeah, I had a conversation with Mike about Marx specifically, but he wanted to just have more discussions on the kind of what led to Karl Marx. And so this isn't going to be a conversation about Marx, but about Hume. And yeah, that's about it.
Yep, thanks. Yep. So, yeah, looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And yeah, so uh, yeah, so I just assembled a playlist of videos about Hume and some lectures and sent them over to Nate. And yeah, so what were some of the things you thought were interesting? What were your main what were your favorite like two or three points that you thought about and heard from these videos?
Yeah, there was like I don't know, there was a lot of stuff in these videos. Like I took pretty copious notes on some of the different things that stood out to me. I think one of the big things that I found interesting was one of them was just the idea of um feelings being kind of ahead of reason. Um, I think a lot of times we as people think that we reason our way into something, like in reason our way into our opinions. But one of the things that one of the videos talked about was this idea that we actually have feelings about something and that those feelings are actually more important than our reasoning and that we actually kind of work backwards into our reasons. Um, and I thought that was interesting. It did make me think of a book that Mike had also suggested that I read called The Righteous Mind that I read. I don't even know how much of it I read, probably a third of it, maybe half of it, called The Righteous Mind that talks a lot about this kind of particular thing. So I'm assuming that what was his name? Haidt? What's his
Jonathan
name?
Haidt. Yeah.
Jonathan Haidt must have read Hume, I'm assuming. But I just think that idea is really interesting because I, like many people, just assume that I am a logical human being who reasons my way into my opinions. But I think we're just a lot more emotional than that.
Right. And a lot of people are resistant to this idea because it almost undermines their credibility and they're like, no, no, no. And it's also hard to think of yourself as somebody who isn't perfectly rational when you're trying to talk about, I don't know, politics and philosophy and stuff. You want to have a clean, just a clean mental structure that's not corrupted by weird biases and stuff. So to admit
Mhm.
that actually a lot of what we think our feelings that we had, impressions, intuitions, and later we find ways to connect them. But it at least helps understand other people, even if it's hard to accept it about ourselves. And yeah, and I actually wonder if people who had read Hume first are more likely to accept and understand Jonathan Haidt's book. So that's one of the things I'm interested in is tracing these ideas.
Hmm.
Like, is that actually a prerequisite that's kind of unspoken? It, like to really appreciate Jonathan Haidt's book, do you have to have considered this idea first through maybe the way Hume argued it or something? I don't know. But when Hume talked about it, he was like the first huge proponent of the idea. He introduced a lot of people to it. So maybe the way he talked about it is the way people should hear it first. So that's what I'm thinking about here. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It is interesting because as I read, because that book was actually pretty interesting. I remember reading it. It was kind of a I don't know, it had a big effect on the way that I thought. And since I've read that, because that was several years ago, I can't remember when you recommended that book, but it was a while ago. And I've noticed it in my own life, like different things that like big emotional things that I'm feeling, things that I feel like, oh, this should be the way that really didn't make much sense. But in my life, I've noticed myself being way more emotional about things and acting in a way that is more in line with my feelings and not my, rational thought and thinking like, wait, why am I doing this? There's no
Mm.
rational reason I'm doing this. The only reason I'm doing this is because I feel like I should or I'm feeling a certain way. Um, and so I think that stuck out to me about Hume because I had been thinking about that for the last couple of years as well.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like permission to be a little honest about your preferences. That it's kind of okay to just have preferences. You don't have to reason your way into everything you care about. Um, and yeah, I think that kind of thing comes up in psychology all the time. And Jordan Peterson, what he says, yeah, I do feel like David Hume is sort of like the origin of an entire way of seeing the world. That some people have a little bit of that knowledge just from because like I said, like Hume's ideas have permeated culture to some degree. But I don't know. When I learned about Hume in college, there were so many things in it and what he said that I hadn't heard. So I think it was pretty important to actually listen. I'm glad I took that class, honestly. So yeah, that's great. What else did you find interesting in the content?
One of my favorite videos that you said was this lecture by Dr. Darren Stalov. Um, and he talks about these, well, actually, let's do this one first. Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. I did like this idea that he gets into about us being kind of just a collection of different perceptions that all kind of we're always like moving and changing our opinions and who we are and all this stuff. Um, and that we're kind of flawed people who are just seeing the world through through our bodies, I guess, through our eyes and experiences and senses. And I don't know, I don't know exactly where that goes per se, but it kind of makes me think of just how, oops, sorry, I have a clock going off here, my alarm. Um, this idea of like people experience the world in a flawed way. Like we don't see objective reality. We see subjective reality through our experiences, through our senses, and through, who we are as a person. And I don't know. I just think that idea is interesting because I think so many people believe that the way that they see things is like I see
Yeah,
objectivity and
straightforward.
yes, I am straightforward. But it's like, no, actually, you have a lot of flaws, like the way that you see the world because of your past, because of how you've lived, even because of your emotions, like what we talked about in the previous point. All of those things kind of combine to make you. like see the world in a different way than everyone else. And I just
Yeah.
find that fascinating, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I love yeah, I love this, honestly. I'm really glad you agreed to do this because um the I'm super interested in the origins of these ideas because I don't remember when I started to see the world the way I see the world. I don't remember what caused me to see it, but I know that most people don't live in the same world I live in. Like the way I talk and the way they talk, it's we talk over each other quite a lot, and and I don't remember where I exactly departed from the way most people think. And this is one of the big ones, one of the huge ones, because it is easy, like the most obvious or straightforward way of seeing reality is that it is what we see, like right in front of us. But this idea of introducing a filter where it's us and actually
Hmm.
we're influencing what we're seeing. So originally that was like a critique of Descartes. I think, therefore I am, and he's
Mm.
like, no, actually, you're like a stream of thoughts. Like, where's the I? But but this idea of introducing an origin, like these. So it's actually there are multiple layers going on here, but there's that subjective layer that our preferences are influencing what we're thinking, but also, yeah, another layer to that is just that ideas kind of are their own thing too, and that we're not responsible for where they come from. We don't know where they came from. We're not responsible for them really. They just pop up into our consciousness, and we're like, okay, that's we identify with it. That's my thought, but yeah, so there's a lot of concepts here that almost like set a foundation, or to me, it's more like they draw an outline or set a scaffolding that later philosophers and science kind of sketched more of and filled in.
Hmm.
And it's, the way we see the world just depends on a lot of these things, and the way we act in the world depends on the way we see the world. So, yeah, I love thinking about the origin of these things.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, like, I feel like that idea of that we are like the way that we see the world is totally imperfect and flawed and like uniquely ours because of our own experiences and things like that. It kind of makes me more curious because it's like, well, I see the world in a very specific way, but the other people around me see it in a totally different way. And it makes me a little bit like, I don't know, yeah, curious is probably the best word, or more humble, maybe, just willing to listen to what other people are saying. Because if I see the world with certain lenses that filter the world in a specific way, and they see the world in a specific way that with their own lenses and filters, then I want to understand why, like what they're seeing, why they're seeing it, why they have these particular point of views. And um anyway, and that's kind of why I got into this originally, like just wanting to understand what people thought about things. And so yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's fascinating.
yeah. It's sort of like when you see like space photographs where they have like they can like take a picture of things in like radio frequency and then other frequencies and then put them together and understand the whole part better. So it's like different people have these different filters in the way they see things, and then if you put them together, you can see the whole picture a little better.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. All right. What else did you like?
Okay. Let's go with this one. So um, one of the lecturers talks about, I have the header called Our Knowledge, but I don't actually know if that's what he called it in the thing, but this kind of, the way that we, um, kind of have no, the different types of knowledge, I guess, that we can acquire. And the first he talks about, I think, Hume calls it the relations of ideas. And this is kind of hard facts that have no basis in our, in reality. like mathematics, geometry, formula, logic, things like that, where the truth of it, the actual ideas themselves are relational and they are true based on their relation. And he had this interesting line in the lecture where he says that like we can completely accept Euclidean geometry as being true without the actual existence of a triangle. Like the triangle itself is not a real thing in our world. It's an abstract idea or like a line or a point, all of these things. And so I just thought that's interesting that we can use logic and reason to discuss these abstract ideas, but they're all kind of relational. And then the second one he talks about, I think he calls them statements of fact, and these are kind of existential things. So this is how our we actually interact with the world. Um, so things like gravity and physics and how things happen around us. And he says there's nothing actually logical about these things, but they're all just observations. It's like this cause and effect. Like we've seen things fall for so long that we just assume that every time something, is let go, it's going to drop.
Mm.
And there's also physics and stuff behind that. But I don't know. I just thought that was kind of an interesting way to kind of bifurcate the two ways that we see the world, like the different knowledge that we have. One of them is very logical and rational, and then the other one is kind of more experimental and observational, where it's like we've seen this so many times, we've seen this cause and effect so many times that we just assume that we base our knowledge off of that.
Yeah, it's just like a statistical association and we're confident in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, we just take it as it is, and that's apparently how life is, but it's not like reasoned. It's not reason. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think maybe I learned that more in my abstract algebra class, maybe because they're like
Hmm.
different ways of defining rule systems that don't apply to the universe, maybe. They could be useful if you see the world, if you use them to measure the world, but there you can invent mathematical systems where they have wonky rules, and as long as they hold a few axioms together, they're actually legit in some way. So I don't know. I'm not a math major, so I don't remember exactly. That wasn't as interesting to me. I majored in physics. I want to understand the real world, but yeah, that it is a little interesting. But that idea that the domain of rationality is kind of separate from these like known facts that are just kind of given and apparent.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, and so, and there's one important thing that I want to get your thoughts on that I, well, this impacted me the most when I took the philosophy class. And that
Hmm.
was the difference between, and these are related, the difference between ought and is, and uh, basically how value is subjective. So those two ideas, that there's a difference between ought and is, and that values are subjective. One of the things I hear a lot randomly, I used to when I spent time on Facebook, there'd be some announcement about Mars or something or progress towards space exploration, and some moron in the comments would be like, "Oh, great, humans are gonna go ruin another planet," and I was like, rocks. There's just rocks on Mars. Like, who are you ruining it for? Like, what value does Mars have? Like, literally, like, who cares? And it's because a lot of people still see random things as having some kind of imbued, inherent value to them. They don't realize that they're
Hmm.
the ones valuing it. There is no inherent value. Value is always like this attribute given by a valuer, someone who values it. And
Hmm.
so that really changed the way I saw things, and prepared it helped me, it prepared my mind to understand economics better as well, and which is why the video. that I put in the playlist to cover this idea was actually an economics video because I couldn't find a good one on Hume, that Hume talked about. But and it's related to the ought and is problem because a lot of conversations do mix up what is and what should be. And so, yeah, what are your thoughts on all that? How much did that kind of stuff is a little more difficult because for you there wasn't a clear explanation from Hume that you saw
Yeah.
about either of those really, but what do you think about that? And does it feel important to you?
Um, yes, I think it does. I think like for me, like the I got introduced to this, the first video that you had shared was an economical video about like the guy had just a quick example. He had two different shirts that were the exact same shirt, but one of them had a picture of some famous person. Another one had a picture of a different famous person. And based on which famous picture was on the shirt, people would value it differently. And so this, it can, in an economic point of view, was saying that value is completely subjective because it doesn't relate one for one to how much labor and let's see, the amount of labor used to produce the object and the amount of resources used to produce the object. And so, but to tie that into like a larger context of the is and ought, um, well, my train of thought just went kaput. But yeah, I think let me see here. Sorry.
Well, real quick, I'll just insert.
Yeah.
It is kind of like a preview of Marx as well, because you know the idea of value being subjective is something I saw from Hume, but the labor theory of value is something that connects this idea of value being subjective to what Marx was saying, and that's Marx's theory that
Hmm.
value is determined by how much labor goes into something,
Oh.
which is funny because I've worked on a lot of things that ended up being worthless. But
Haven't we
yeah,
all?
but yeah, so um, yeah, so it's kind of like yeah, kind of an intersection and a preview as well as like the video about is versus ought. It talks about Kant a little bit in that one, and
Mm.
uh, which is why yeah, you told me that you hadn't watched it really, or you watched some of it or something, and
I
then
think
weren't sure.
I'd, yeah, I think I'd watched some of it, but didn't do a ton of thinking about it because I thought it might be for the next the next section.
Yeah,
Um,
but I mean these people they transition into each other. Like Kant, his like I think if I remember right, he was kind of older, and we'll get into this next time. But he was older when he got into philosophy. He kind of lived a
mm,
long, normal life, and then when he was like 50, he saw Hume's stuff, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is important, but I don't like some of the conclusions, and I need to write about this." And
mm.
so the is ought thing is one of the issues because the idea that you couldn't find objective morality really bothered him. That
Oh,
you couldn't say you like everyone ought to do this and find a way to argue for it based on facts. He didn't. I think he didn't like that. But we'll get into it later. But basically, that kind of helps show that Hume really was a big deal, and his ideas had major impact. And Kant directly influenced later people as well, who influenced Marx. So I mean, there is a lineage here. It is a little weird though, like with Marx. I'm not gonna lie. Like these ideas are important for background, but a lot of what Marx did, it felt I don't know he was a lot more interested in politics than in philosophy, I feel like. And the philosophy was
yeah.
kind of like what I was about to use this term from Kant that Jordan Peterson uses all the time that people probably don't really understand. But anyway, so a priori or a priori. Have you heard that term before? A priori or a priori?
If did someone maybe the professor used it in one of these.
Oh, yeah, I think I noticed that. I was like, "Ha, that's funny," because he hasn't covered Hume yet. I mean, Kant yet. Um, but yeah, that's an example of how these ideas have just infiltrated our language and everything.
Hmm.
But basically, it looked like Marx valued a certain thing and then kind of found philosophies that justified what he wanted, kind of.
Hmm.
That's what I see. But he does have some interesting ideas, so I guess we'll talk about that at some point. But yeah, just saying like Hume was one of the major ones at the beginning. And there are others that we're not talking about. Like there were like a dozen or so before Marx that would be good to talk about, but we're just hitting the big ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I do have a quick question about this. The is ought problem, is that something that Hume specifically talked about, or is this
Yeah.
Kant's critique on Hume's
It's
logic?
it's Hume.
Hume talked about it specifically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I
And
see, I
Kant didn't
see.
like the conclusion. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, you
Okay.
can't derive an ought from an is. You can't say, uh, I am hungry, therefore I should eat food. You can't actually say that. Maybe you
Okay.
should eat food, but and it doesn't just depend on other things. Like maybe your goal is to starve to death or to go on a hunger strike.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah,
You know, which so starving to death sounds like an irrational goal, but it's a preference, and maybe somebody has a preference strong enough that, and so that you can have preferences that you can reason to partially, but it ultimately traces back to a fundamental value that you're trying to pursue. So when Gandhi went on a hunger strike, it was a reason. He had a reason for it, and it was to give attention to his cause. But his cause was the original ought. Like we ought to not be this way.
yeah.
And then he used reason. People respond to hunger strikes or whatever. It's been a while since I've looked at the history of that, so I don't remember exactly how it went down. But it's just saying like you can actually separate it if you trace it back and you're careful enough. You can separate the is from the ought, and just saying how things are alone does not mean you should do something
Hmm.
unless you've already contextually agreed on an ought. So
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. Hmm.
yeah,
That is interesting. And I feel like it is really easy to blur those lines
yeah, for sure.
between the two. Um, yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
All right. So I don't want to take too much of your time. Was there anything else you think's important to bring up? Like anything that was important to you that you felt like maybe changed a little bit the way you see the world, or are those the main
Um,
things?
I don't know. I think those were the main things. I
It
think the
were
biggest, still the biggest one for me is like our imperfect and flawed way of seeing things. Like is we see the world in such a subjective way is big. And then also like as we were talking, I think that idea of subjective value, because I when I originally like the video I watched was economical, and so I took it into like an economic context, which makes perfect sense when you think about it. But taking that into a broader kind of sense that we are the valuers, that the thing itself doesn't actually have value until we, as the actor per se, you know,
demonstrate that we
assign, yeah,
value it.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that is just a really interesting idea. And
So that might
yeah.
influence the way you think going forward. We can like just briefly come back to that with when we talk about Kant, just for a second to see if you have any further thoughts on it. It's okay if you don't, but I think that's interesting. You know, like the subjective thing you talked about, the first thing that you took away, like
Mm,
that wasn't something I took away that was big from Hume. It's probably because I had heard it before from somewhere else. And it's interesting, like all the content that people talk about with Hume, he wrote a lot, and not as much as others. I think Kant wrote tons and tons and tons, but um, I could be wrong on some of this, but it's interesting that the things people want to talk about are obviously important to some people. So literally everything that you saw in this playlist, there these things were important to some people. It was
Hmm.
maybe the first time they encountered these ideas, and maybe culturally it was the first time somebody had explained these in the way Hume did. And maybe these are some of the things that we take for granted because we heard them from someone else who heard them from someone else who maybe originally heard them from Hume. I don't know. But that's why I'm interested in somewhat. I'm trying to trace where where people's worldviews come from. And maybe philosophy has played a much bigger role than I thought before. So, because in, historically, as a member of the church, I haven't like the way philosophy is talked about is almost like a bad thing, like, oh, it's just people's ideas. You can't really trust them, really. It's just philosophies of men. But there are some truths from science that we know 100% are true that philosophy does prepare you to appreciate. And also philosophy does drive a little bit of the exploration side of it, like why perform certain experiments to begin with. And it's kind of shaped by the worldview that asks the question, like what's over there? And then you use science to go there. So these things are important, at least culturally.
Yeah.
And yeah. So any final thoughts?
Um, no, I don't think so. This was interesting. I feel like you helped solidify and pick out some specific things in this kind of giant list of, little things that I got from these videos.
Yeah. And it's okay. Like you have different things that you think are important and that's great. And I've got my own things that like I always look back and I was like, yeah, I liked Hume because of that. I like that was big in the way I think about things. So, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, thanks again for agreeing to do this and
Yeah, no
yeah.
worries.
And thanks everyone for watching and in 3 years, someone should leave a comment and ask a weird question, and I will answer it. All right. Thanks.
That's it.